You may think that to have more impact, more success, more growth requires you to be tougher. That is so far from the truth. Now that Jupiter is coming to a stop to change directions forward in its exalted sign of Cancer, the stars are inviting you into something more powerful than tough. That is emotional capacity. The thing that I've seen over and over again is that your external reach, your outer impact, is limited only by your internal safety. Yes, your inner work. What would you say yes to if you trusted your capacity to hold the emotional weight of your own success? And how does Jupiter direct in Cancer invite you to swing your pendulum higher? Welcome back, Star Powered family. And if you're new here, aloha and welcome. I'm Leslie Tagorda, Hawaii born astrologer, author of the upcoming book, Astrology for Changemakers, coming out in September 2026, and creator of the Astrobrand Method. I light the path for visionaries, healers, and changemakers like you to attune to your strengths, purpose, and power written in your stars. If astrology, leadership, and real change through an uncolonized lens are your jam, click subscribe and let's dive in. Okay, friends, before we dive into the actual episode, I have a little bit of a PSA, something that came to me in the shower this morning as I was getting ready to record this podcast. And even though I'm going to be talking about our leadership skills and all of the bright spots and the growth potential of Jupiter direct in Cancer, there's something deeper and darker that wanted to come through and be shared with you today. Now, Jupiter direct in Cancer is asking you to now see, right? Because now it was going in reverse. We've had all this time to recalibrate, and now it's going direct. It is asking you to now see the true meaning behind the wars on immigrant, brown, and Black families. These wars that we have domestically here in the United States, that we have all over the globe, was never about safety or family values. Never. It was always about greed, supremacy, and access to the resources of the motherland. Now, one thing not many people are talking about are about the deep shadows of Jupiter in Cancer. Now, I don't like to spend time in the shadows, but we have to acknowledge the shadows not to be fear mongering, but to understand what we have to then dredge up and change to bring light to. Now, Jupiter, we think is about expansion and belief. Yes, it is. But on its underbelly or in its underbelly, Jupiter is religious persecution and prejudice, where your beliefs are controlled, usually by a religious authority. And anyone with differing beliefs are outcast or systematically discriminated against. Okay. I've seen so many clients who've suffered a lot of religious persecution having Jupiter in quote unquote bad placements or under a lot of duress where they've been able to liberate themselves from this religious persecution. And Cancer, the sign of the family, home, and at its highest vibration is about belonging. Well, at its lowest vibration is clan mentality, the mentality that defines hatred, suspicion of outsiders, and uses the us versus them. Cancer, of course, is also the sign of the motherland and the valuable resources that provide a nourishment, food, clean water, mineral deposits, and all of the culture and resources that live in the soil in Mother Earth. A terrible shadow of Jupiter in Cancer are the beliefs that propagandize that war is for safety of our family protection and of our family values. But wars are not making us safer. Now that Jupiter is stationing direct, may you finally see and believe that this is all a big lie to steal motherlands and lives for greed and domination. So may we have a call for peace, for expanded peace and belonging, for the true acceptance and protection of motherland, children, women, and families. Okay, friends, I'm sorry. I just had to get that off my heart. It's just been, I don't often talk about wars and politics, but it's just been so much lately. And I know we've all been feeling this. It's just like, it's so senseless. So thank you for allowing me to share that. But I want to move on to what I really love talking about. And it's the things that we actually have the ability to make change for in our lives. Unfortunately, most of us do not have any power over geopolitics or climate or anything like that. So the only things that we have power over are our ability to make change and lead in our lives and in our communities. Now, even though I was just talking about the underbelly of Jupiter and Cancer, I have to let you know that these are like just probably just my all time. I love all of the signs and planets. What am I talking about? But I love Jupiter and Cancer. Maybe it's my sun conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius in the ninth house. Maybe it's my Sagittarius moon and my Sagittarius north node in my sixth and seventh houses. But I've always been able to see silver linings. And even when the world is burning, and indeed is terrible and oppressive for so many around the globe right now, if you are listening with me, I'm guessing that you, my friend, are also a lucky and privileged person. I recognize my luck and my privilege, and it's not a bad thing to be privileged. It's only bad to be privileged when you don't see your privilege and then become entitled. Now, while we have so little power to change the geopolitical landscape or Mother Earth's climate, the one thing that we can control is ourselves, our communities, and how in reciprocity we contribute back into the world through our leadership and change making. And so, in today's episode, I wanted to share with you what Jupiter direct in Cancer means for your personal expansion and your leadership, how Cancer's superpower of emotional intelligence is your necessary key, and how leaders and change makers, we all require expanding our emotional capacity. Lastly, I want to tie it all up for you so that you can figure out, or how you can see, how you can recognize already that as your pendulum swings higher, now that Jupiter is moving forward again, how you can weather all of these changes in your leadership. So, before we dive into the mechanics of this transit, I first want to invite you into the space where we actually can build this capacity together and in real time over one revolution of the sun. And that is my star powered circle 4.0. If you haven't already heard, Doors to Star Powered Circle, a global community, is now open with our opening ceremony scheduled for March 26, 6 days after our astrological new year. This is the fourth year of our global sanctuary for changemakers and leaders who, like you, already know that we have the tools, we have all of the knowledge and all of the wisdom. What we truly need is integration and the witnessing to do the big things, including emotional capacity. Now, let's look at why your internal hearth is the key to your next big expansion. All right, we talked a lot already about Jupiter's shadows, but I want to talk about Jupiter's process. Jupiter, of course, is the planet of expansion, of believing in exceeding our expectation, growing. Right. And when it's moving direct, it's forward growth, it's normal process or it's traditional process. We are, whatever Jupiter touches, it expands. And Jupiter is not gonna is going to expand like a magnifying glass, anything that's under that magnifying glass. If things are going really great, Jupiter is going to expand that. If things are going really bad, Jupiter is going to expand that. Now, to prevent things from bad things getting worse is to use Jupiter's appreciation and perspective of gratitude, that silver lining. You are already a winner. Oh, you didn't get that job that you wanted. That's okay, because what you have, you're going to still take the learning lessons from. You're going to learn the next time on how to like ace that interview or the application or whatever that process to take that next big leap. Jupiter's gratitude reminds you that no matter what the outcome, you have learned a lesson, there is a silver lining, and that you are still a winner. You are still successful. Because if you start thinking that you're a loser and not successful, well, guess what? Jupiter is going to just expand that belief. So, what perspective will you have? What belief? Now, when Jupiter is in retrograde, which is like 40% of the year, Jupiter, is so far out there, it spends almost half the year in retrograde. When any planet is retrograde, it is doing it's reviewing its processing. So, if Jupiter is about believing, then Jupiter in retrograde is then examining and reconciling and looking at our beliefs. Are these still true? Are these limiting beliefs? Are they holding me back? Are we expanding in the way that we're supposed to be expanding? Or are we just like growing too scattered where we could be better focused by growing more deeply instead of outward? And so Jupiter, while in retrograde for the last 4 months, we had this chance to reorganize our belief systems. And now that Jupiter is going direct again, hopefully your root systems, because we're talking about Cancer, have gotten deeper and wider so that we can have a much more stable ability to bend in the wind, to swing with that pendulum. And our beliefs are now expanded, that we've examined the limiting beliefs that have kept us in place instead of looking at the larger perspectives and the bigger possibilities, believing in our capacity and our ability to exceed our expectations. And so I love looking at these retrograde processes. And in Star Powered Circle, we are always going to be having our retrograde masterclasses, especially for those inner planets, so that we can learn about these processes and make informed decisions on how we are going to actually make use and harness these energies in our lives and our businesses. So, Star Powered Circle and our retrograde master classes, you'll find that there. Now, when we look at Cancer, Cancer is, a water sign, a sign that is often tied to emotional intelligence and softness and caretaking and the divine mother. And oftentimes in our Western values, our Western society and our empirical values, we look at Cancer as emotional work or woman's work. And so we don't often see the value of Cancer's emotional labor. But this is changing, especially with Jupiter going through Cancer, because Cancer's superpowers are the powers of emotional intelligence, and that emotional intelligence to create safety. And safety and acceptance and belonging, just like the safety of a divine mother or a healthy mother that makes you feel unconditionally loved, that makes you feel safe even when they are reprimanding you to do something differently, that makes you feel so loved and accepted that you can just let everything go and stop pretending to be somebody else. This safety, this inclusion, this belonging, this acceptance is the foundation to lasting change. If you've ever worked with a therapist, or maybe you are a therapist yourself, you know that creating safe spaces to witness is that first step. I talk about this emotional wisdom so much because I've seen it over and over again. If we don't feel safe, if we don't feel secure, if we don't feel like we belong in certain places, we have this hard shell. We close ourselves off. There's no way that lasting change is being made. And so I know with my personal chart, I have Cancer on the second house, and that's how I add value. So even though I don't have any Cancer planets or anything, because Cancer is the ruler of my second house, I know that I personally bring the gift of acceptance, the gift of belonging. And that's what I love about my global community, Star Powered Circle. So many clients and members within Star Powered Circle have noted how they feel so safe, so seen, so validated, so accepted. That's what I love creating, so that we can witness each other and celebrate our expansion, so that we can witness our challenges and reframe those challenges so that our nervous systems register safety, allowing each one of us to take bigger risks in our businesses and our leadership. And so, if you're looking for that community and belonging, Star Powered Circle is absolutely for you. Now, why do leaders and change makers require emotional capacity, and how do we get it? Before we can answer that, I want to really explain what emotional capacity is and some of the aspects to emotional capacity, including how to build it and how to notice what emotional capacity myths about emotional capacity. Now, emotional capacity, according to the Google, emotional capacity is the ability to recognize, process, and manage your own emotions, as well as tolerating emotional discomfort like stress, grief, or anger without shutting down, becoming defensive, or lashing out. Emotional capacity represents the amount of emotional space, I like to call this padding, or energy you have to handle life's pressure and support of others. Now, I started going to therapy regularly in this kind of cycle of my life back in September when I was going through all of my health challenges. I had no idea what was happening to me before I had my diagnoses. And things were terrible in my house, in work, in just like my own personal livelihood. I had zero space. Things would, like, I would be triggered by all kinds of things. I would be, hiding and taking a lot of naps because I couldn't handle life's pressures. I completely shut down. And my husband and I were just fighting over and over because I was just so defensive. And he was defensive too. He was feeding off of just like my uncapacity, my limited space to handle anything. And so when I started going to therapy, I'm going to this wonderful person who does biofeedback and uses these different nodes that rewire your brain, especially for people who have depression, where talk therapy doesn't always work. But neuroscientists are finding that people who have depression, their neural pathways are actually wired differently. And so through this process, I had really quick results in less than 3 months of this neurofeedback of just rewiring my brain that allowed me to have more emotional space so that I could handle my upcoming surgeries, so that I could handle getting through this diagnosis, so that I could come back to work even stronger and better. And so when you have emotional capacity, you actually have strength to be able to handle the ups and downs. And because I was going through that crisis, and I tell this to my clients all the time, when you're having a crisis or a challenge, it is a sure sign that you're getting ready for that next big emotional leap. And when you have that next big emotional leap, that means you can handle higher and bigger successes that come with the equally bigger failures and disappointments. Now, when you have these crises and challenges, yeah, you can choose to run away from them. You can choose to bypass them. You can choose to like avoid them and say, oh, everything is fine. And you can choose to not do the emotional work, the emotional labor to increase your capacity. But my friend, if you are refusing to handle that crisis and move through it and move forward with it, then you're missing the point of that crisis to get you ready for that next big leap. If you avoid the crisis and you deny it, you're not going to have that next big leap in your leadership and your ability to make impact. And so I knew, knowing all that I knew, that my crises was a messenger saying, okay, Leslie, you're getting ready for something big. I know that I have my book launch coming up, my book coming out, and I was going to have to really grow my emotional capacity. What if people don't like my book? What if people say really bad things about me or astrology or my writing or my talents? I'm going to have to be able to learn how to hold that space, because as many people who are going to say that they don't like me or my work or my book or my view of astrology, there are going to be just as many, if not more, people that say, this is the work that I've needed. This is what I've needed to hear. How do you know me so well? You totally get me. And that's what I'm really trying to do in this work, is to say, I see you. I understand what you're going through, and you are not alone. And so our ability to build our emotional capacity is paramount for folks like you and me, the leaders, the business owners, the change makers who are trying to actually make good in the world. Now, I want to like bust a few myths about emotional capacity, because you know what? Emotional capacity is not niceness, and it is not the absence of emotions. Okay. Those are like the two big takeaways that you need to understand about emotional capacity. Emotional capacity is not an innate or fixed trait, meaning you can build it, you can train it, you can develop it, just like a muscle. So if you don't have a lot of emotional capacity, just like I didn't in this last fall, I got help. I grew it. I went to a therapist. I did all of the things so that I could really open myself back up. Emotional capacity also doesn't mean that you're always nice. Emotional capacity actually requires you to have strong boundaries, to be able to have difficult conversations with respect, being able to both deliver and receive hard messages. When I was doing my research for this episode, I was actually reading this article that says if you have a hard time delivering hard feedback or giving like critique to others, that actually means that you have very little emotional intelligence. And oh goodness. Another myth about emotional capacity says that emotional strength means not having or suppressing your feelings. And that's a myth. That's bullshit, because actually real emotional strength is the ability to stay present when things get comfortable versus hiding, bypassing, or avoiding. This is the one that I have been really working on lately, to be able to stay present when things get challenging. So hard to do. Emotional capacity, another a myth that, I talk about all the time, especially when I talk about valuing emotional labor, is that a myth about emotional capacity and emotional labor is that it's only a soft skill with no leadership value. And we know that is total bullshit, especially in our rise of AI. We see that people are hiring for humanities, meaning that it's not just all your hard skills, but it's your soft skills, your ability to understand emotions, understand human psychology. And so when we think about emotional capacity as a leadership value, we're seeing that our emotional intelligence, our emotional quotient, and our ability to have these difficult conversations is actually a valuable predictor of high performance. You make better decisions, you have better trusting relationships, which all lead to better outcomes in life and in leadership. And lastly, emotional capacity and resilience. The myth about it is that if you have it, you can bounce back quickly. And that's not true, because true emotional capacity and resilience is about bouncing into something new and accepting change, not bouncing back to who you were. Because when something happens, challenge or crises, you're bouncing into something new in an enhanced and altered state, an experience that is based on the experience from which you just came from, meaning you're not going back to the old version of you. You're moving forward and continuing forward into a new version of you. So taking your time, but still taking the time that you need, but still moving forward and not getting stuck in the past. That's what emotional capacity is about. And so you can see how all of these are really great skills for leaders who were always navigating challenges, always navigating disappointments or experiments, and like keeping on moving forward. Now, when you have high capacity, you can handle, digest, and work through intense emotions, remaining grounded and empathetic. When you have low capacity, you can feel overwhelmed, shut down, become irritable, and numb. And, we can fluctuate between high and low capacity depending on how our body feels, how stressed we are, how much sleep we've had, how much support from our communities and families we have. And so your emotional resilience and capacity is also based on how well you're taking care of your body and how interconnected to community you have. And so this capacity on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, month to month basis is going to fluctuate. So even if you have, a high IQ, EQ, high emotional capacity, on a day-to-day or hour-to-hour, you can have low capacity. And when you have that low capacity, when your padding is non-existent, this is a sure sign that you need to take better care of your stress, your sleep, your regulation, and also finding support. It is so impossible to do this alone. Hello, that's why we have Star Powered Circle. I know you want to be in there. I know I want to be in there. And so when we think about emotional capacity, I see that we've already painted an amazing picture in terms of why you need to do this. And so, as we think of Jupiter expanding, I want you to really start to focus on a picture of a pendulum. Right. When you have a little pendulum and maybe you're divining and it's moving, in this very small little portion. This is if you have like low emotional capacity. You don't want to take chances because you don't want to get disappointed. You're afraid of your, emotions. You're afraid of being disappointed. You're afraid of fear. You're afraid of being critiqued, right? So your pendulum swings very small. And on the other hand, so then you don't take risks. You don't be visible. You don't speak up. You don't share your brilliance. But now that Jupiter is moving direct, I hope that you have expanded your emotional capacity, knowing that even if the pendulum is swinging down and you're going through challenges, that you can handle bigger challenges because you now know that you can take bigger risks and have bigger successes. And so this Jupiter now going direct in Cancer, Jupiter is going to be moving very, very quickly through the natal chart as it, heads over to Leo. I feel like Jupiter is moving so fast around the zodiac right now. We normally think that Jupiter spends about a year in every sign, but it's just going to zip through the rest of Cancer, the second half of Cancer, and land in Leo very, very soon, where then Leo will expand our ability to shine brightly and courageously. So you see why you're doing this work right now, to expand your emotional capacity. So now that your emotional capacity is bigger than your fear, what big leaps and expansions will you finally say yes to in your life and leadership? So, friends, I hope you consider joining Star Powered Circle 4.0. Head on over to starpowered.com/circle. It's going to be full of ritual new moon ceremony, astrology masterclasses with a global group of people just like you, change makers who love astrology, who love spirituality, and want to be seen and understood by other folks just like them. We're really focusing on community building this year. I love seeing when people get together to collaborate, to work together, to hire each other, to know each other in person. It warms my heart. So head on over to starpower.com/circle and sign up now. We have service-based scholarships as well if finances are really tight for you. So just reach out and message us. starpower.com/circle. We'll see you then. Bye for now. So thank you again. If this podcast has touched your heart, please share it with others. Please leave me a rating and review so we can reach the hearts of even more change makers like you.